Hi everyone, I'm Tyler with the Denver Communists. I'm going to be giving a little report back on the Line 3 action that we attended. Go ahead and stop my video. Okay, less than 24 hours before we arrived, the state tried to take down George Floyd Square and assassinated Winston Smith. We met up with a comrade of ours and brother to Paul Castaway. We ended up taking a city block, which was powerful to see and be a part of. The block that right winger just drove his car into and killed a person. The next day, we made our trip up north. Um, the Anishinaabe have organized a stand against Enbridge's Line 3, which would cut through treaty lands and sacred wild rice beds in northern Minnesota. Minnesota is home to over 10,000 lakes and the headwaters of the Mississippi River. It is one of the most water abundant regions in the country with over 90,000 miles of shoreline. Because of its unique climate, it's one of the few places in the world where true wild rice grows. The rice is sacred to the local indigenous culture. Wild rice is one of the few remaining cultural artifacts of Anishinaabe culture after peace treaties with the United States stripped much of their land. An Ojibwe leader stated, "It's the foundation of our identity. It's the reason we came here. Take that away, and who are we?" Um, in 1855, the Anishinaabe ceded 10 million acres of Minnesota's northern lake country to federal government, but reserved the rights to hunt, fish, gather, and hold ceremony on the lands. Anishinaabe territory was included in a series of 19th century land treaties to make peace in return for money and goods. Over time, the amount of reserved land for natives or for native tribes dwindled as the U.S. government looked to expand and capitalize off timber sales. Now buried beneath its resource-laden land and its troubled history lies Enbridge's Line 3, a 34-inch pipeline built in the 1960s that ships crude oil from Alberta, Canada, to a terminal in Wisconsin that is adjacent to the Bay of Lake Superior. Built before the National Environmental Protection Act of 1970, the line didn't require any environmental review. Enbridge wants to now build a 36-inch pipeline that would replace an existing line that is now deteriorating across northern Minnesota. The Calgary-based energy company, also an investor in the Dakota Access Pipeline, plans to build its pipeline through the heartland of wild rice beds and the headwaters of the Mississippi River, further afflicting indigenous communities that have already been subjected to pollution and exploitation of their land. Enbridge has also paid local sheriffs and police departments over $750,000 in order to protect construction specifically for this action we just attended. Department of Homeland Security has also been rendering its services to disrupt water protectors by providing air support via helicopters during this action. A helicopter hovered dangerously close to protectors, casting dust and debris rocks rocks to be hurled at people. This was also extremely dangerous because had the helicopter lost its lift, which helicopters at low altitude or which happens at low altitude, it would have crashed and killed protectors. One of the individuals camping near us was talking to me later that night. He mentioned he was under the helicopter when it came in and that it was wobbling in the air, which made him feel extremely unsafe. My observations about the event was that was extremely well planned and thought out, considering attendance was double what was expected. I think the planners took a lot of lessons learned from Standing Rock and applied them to this, which is what we always should be doing with our own actions. Looking at what worked, what didn't, and adjusting as needed. Yes, there was a mixed bag of politics from single-issue environmentalists, Bernocrats, retirees, the true blue Dems, and radicals such as us. Before we left, Steve from Seattle Revolutionary Socialists gave us the advice not to be cynical, and I think the three of us took that to heart. Rather than dunking on the lib fest or going in pessimistic, we took the opportunity to have great conversations with a wide range of political views, and we confidently inserted our politics into conversations and ultimately into their consciousness. From personal engagements I had, I thought they were great. We had the opportunity to connect with two comrades in the RSN, thus strengthening our ties as a network. I think coming out of this, I'm more confident in my politics. I'm more confident in our project as revolutionary socialists, and I feel more confident with the comrades in my own organization. All right, and that is it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we went to the Treaty People Gathering Action 2 weekends ago. It was really, really cool. Really, a lot of really beautiful things, engaging in a strategy to confront oppression head on with an orientation, a very clear orientation towards masses of working people. My hope is that our talk and discussion today will help myself and others think harder and deeper about ways we can relate to and continue to support the Line 3 movement and Indigenous sovereignty everywhere. I'll be using the article written by Regina Johnson and Brian Ward that was posted as recommended reading, which generally focuses on the political analysis that Marx puts forth for Indigenous sovereignty, or kind of both of them at the same time. To quote Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, everything in US history is about the land, who oversaw it and cultivated it, fished its waters, maintained its wildlife, who invaded and stole it, how it became a commodity, broken into pieces to be bought and sold on the market. Capitalism arrives at the shores of Turtle Island, dripping with blood and hungry for more. Every inch of the earth is doomed to ravage under capitalist invasion, unless we can do something about it, unless we can organize against it. Marx uses the term primitive accumulation, but he didn't really intend to be derogatory, so I'll be saying primary accumulation just to kind of get away from those misconceptions. In his book, Red Skin, White Masks, Glenn Sean Coulthard of the Yellow Knives Dene people of the Northwest says, Marx most thoroughly links the totalizing power of capital with that of colonialism by way of the theory of primary accumulation. The driving question of primary accumulation is, how is the land transformed into capital and private property? Primary accumulation took land by force of war and genocide, establishing a barrier around this land, expelling the indigenous population to create a landless and cheap labor pool, and then releasing the land into the privatized mainstream of capital accumulation. Primary accumulation is the material basis for the genocide and destruction of indigenous people who were kicked off of their land, barred from supporting themselves on it, and forced into exploitive labor. This is the capitalist mode of production that was forced on them from the colonial invasion. And being forced into these labor relations of wage slavery and exploitation, Native people become subjected to a similar but nuanced class oppression similar to all workers. Why does this matter? Native people hold revolutionary power at their workplace through the collective labor with other workers, and can use this power to change society for the better through solidarity, through the mechanism of solidarity. We don't equate the oppression that white workers face with that of indigenous workers, but say that Native people are also workers who hold the power, but also bear the oppression of class. There's some necessary clarity around solidarity as a term. When we're talking solidarity, we don't muddle into generalizations synonymous with mere unity or harmony. We also don't allow solidarity to be lost to generalizations of assistance and hand-holding for its own sake. While these things are all fine and good, they don't ring as true as solidarity does in the context of revolution. Solidarity specifically indicates a recognition of oppression as interconnected and the necessity of a collective resistance to fight back against this oppression. Solidarity means that your fight is my fight, their fight is our fight. This is the central idea of the internationalism of Trotsky and why he ultimately split with Stalin over the disagreement on socialism for one group and abandoned the principle of solidarity. The fight for indigenous sovereignty is inextricably linked with the fight for abolition, for BLM, for free Palestine, open borders, LGBTQ plus liberation, etc. Marxists don't engage in these fights merely because it's the right thing to do, although I suppose that it is, but because the oppression of one is linked to the oppression of all, and we must actively fight together if we ever hope to win. Solidarity demands that we engage in struggles that don't appear to immediately affect ourselves for the betterment of all. The only means towards mass revolution is to engage in struggles of solidarity. Through fighting together, we will be able to break down the false divisions that have been sold to us As Frederick Douglass says, they divided both to conquer each. We should identify our allies while also clearly stating our enemies. The Democratic Party has nothing but empty promises and false hopes to offer us. They have proven time and time again to be the managers of capitalist exploitation, even if their enslaving hand is ever so slightly softer than their friends to the right. We must fight for independence from Democrats and push for socialism from below. Grassroots movements that center the leadership of Indigenous people and their own liberation. There is little power in the elitism of top-down reform. The real power lies with the working masses who power this entire machine. The worker doesn't have the luxury of joining the establishment, but we must build our fight here with each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains and the whole earth to gain. Socialists definitely don't have everything figured out, and we should approach struggles keen to listen. We can't predict when or how a rupture in capital will happen. We can't plan out every contour of the path to revolution or what self-determination will look like for oppressed people. But as socialists, we must become a part of the fight against oppression now and urge them forward towards revolution. We should position ourselves, as Lenin says, as a tribune of the people, ready to react to every manifestation of tyranny and oppression, no matter where it takes place or to whom. That's all I got.
So I think next up is Chelsea.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Tyler. I guess I'll just touch on a couple of the points that these guys made, and I definitely don't have much prepared as I came back and hit the ground running once again. But what I first want to kind of point to is, you know, the word mass that Ben just used. Of course, I think one of their greatest goals in the calling of the Treaty People Gathering, you know, which aligns perfectly with our politics, was to build a great mass, build a great mass of people to bring together, to bring awareness and attention to something that they've actually been fighting against for some time. And they definitely succeeded in that goal. When Tyler said they're about double as many as expected, I think there were roughly 2,000 people that ended up showing up. So they definitely succeeded in that goal of creating mass, which is huge, huge. And once again, this isn't a new fight. This has been going on for a while now. And I think Tyler is correct in saying that there were lessons learned from Standing Rock that they utilized and created something highly organized, very educational, if you will. It was an event that went over the course of several days with one primary day of action. And the days prior to that were a couple of like training days. One was on nonviolent direct action, and the day prior to that was on education around the treaties and things of that nature. So that was very well executed in that regard, just like Tyler said, and very successful in creating mass, which I think is most excellent. It's what they need. And it's what we believe is needed as well as Marxists. With that being said, you know, of course, there was some talk about kind of the mixed bag of politics, and this, you know, Steve's, again, our recommendation that we received to not go in with too much cynicism, which I do think was really helpful, especially when, you know, it did turn out that there was a huge mixed bag of politics, which is to be expected. And it was interesting for me to have that experience and engage on that level, not just in one day of actions, but over the course of a few days, where you're really like meeting people in these spaces and hearing this exchange of ideas, not in the course of a couple of hours, but over the course of a few days, whether it be from other people who are at the event, who are also camping there, whether it be from the organizers themselves, conversations that you have with people directly and conversations that you overhear. There were definitely some really magnificent opportunities for us to intervene, and things that happened and came about very organically, just in conversation, that allowed us to really kind of implant and discuss our politics with people. And one of the ways that happened really in a way that I didn't really anticipate when we arrived, we got there fairly early, and we went and found our little camp spot, and we set up Camp Comrade, and we had our Palestinian flag between two of our tents, and then we had the banner that said solidarity with the Indigenous Intifada. And below that, it said free Palestine, fuck 12, and BLM. Interestingly enough, it just so happened that where we were posted up down this path, just so happened that our 3 tents with that banner and that flag were like the first thing that people saw when they came down that hill. Interestingly enough, it led to a lot of moments of people coming up and asking questions and allowing us to kind of engage in that discourse. Shockingly, like there were a lot of people who didn't know what fuck 12 meant. And so we were able to kind of hop in and create connections between these different fights, and really touch on the internationalism that we focus on as well. And it really just brought about some really magnificent opportunities for us to intervene with our politics and to speak with people with differing ideas, and hopefully plant some good seeds. It also led to a couple of evenings where people would just come up and we would just sit in a circle and discuss ideas for quite some time. And I think there was a lot of success in that. And I think it's one of the reasons that we want to show up and intervene in these spaces as well. Because there will always be such a mixed bag, right? But when we show up face first, present, ready to go, people are interested in having these conversations. People are interested in these ideas. And so when we find ourselves amongst thousands of other people with very varying politics, they're curious. Ben and I were talking about, he said that people want to hear these ideas and they see these this propaganda and they see these statements and they're curious and they want to learn more. And those conversations were able to just manifest throughout the entire weekend. And that's one of the reasons that we were there, right? Not just to engage in this direct action, but also to make sure that we're going in with sharp politics and the opportunity to engage with people and have that discourse. There were definitely moments, I remember overhearing statements like, we're not here to fight the police, we're here to fight the US government. There's another moment where I heard a woman say, we're not here to fight the police, we're here to fight the corporation. And a couple of those were great, maybe not invitations, but opportunities to kind of challenge some of those ideas. And I think that was done very successfully by the 3 of us that were out in Minnesota. And I think, again, it did give us an opportunity to learn a lot about how we want to organize and how we want to engage with other people. But I think, again, another example is meeting someone who had been to a couple of our meetings. They live here in Denver, and they were out up there, and we met up with them and connected with them, spent a lot of time with them, and had a lot of opportunity to further that engagement and have that deeper connection and thought, and hopefully have them come around and see how they're doing. And I do believe their friend is on this call as well, someone we know. So it was really, really an inspiring, definitely motivating, really exceptional piece of this experience for me was the way that we were able to engage with so many different people in so many different contexts. And back to this sort of mass strategy that they were talking about, and that we mentioned, they definitely succeeded in getting those numbers out. And I think it's to be expected that there'd be a mixed bag of politics, especially, as far as a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals in general. Even if you look at the graphic for the Treaty People gathering, it is very inviting. It does feel very liberal. It does feel very yard sign-y. And that was a great tactic on their end to make this like very open and inviting. And the other thing I think in that tactic was to get all these people to arrive and to buy in, right? Because as it turned out, you have one day of direct action, right? Which sounds so strange. Like you're coming out for this whole weekend. There's one day of this direct action. Well, once people are bought into this fight, right? They get the history, they get the education, they get the ceremony, they get, all of these things going on. People are now here. They're in the space and they surprise everyone with, well, we're staying, we're occupying. So If you can, bring your tents over here and we're not leaving. And I think that was really quite genius on their part. And with that being said, as far as where things are at now, one of their encampments, it lasted for 8 days. They just got a cease and desist order from Enbridge, who won out in its most recent court proceeding. The local sheriff and his wife went and kindly delivered the letter from Enbridge to the Indigenous organizers that were camped out at the easement. Some of the organizers seem to be of the belief that, you know, there's a good relationship between the local sheriff's department and the Indigenous activists there. That's one thing. We kind of operate in a different set of beliefs on that one. And it should be noted that the sheriff was the one who brought the cease and desist letter. After that occurred, the roughly 50 people occupying the easement on the headwaters of the Mississippi did go ahead and break down Firelight Camp. And they have recently sent out like email blasts asking more people to come back up. They have another encampment working right now, and they are planning for a kind of a long summer ahead. Additionally, so that happened on Monday, and then additionally yesterday, it appears as though 30 more people were arrested, a couple of whom had been, you know, chained up to some machinery. And then the other 30, or 27, it was a public nuisance sort of thing. So they've got Red Lake Treaty Camp going up right now in northern Minnesota, and they're asking for more people to kind of come up and join on the front lines. So I know I've been kind of going off for a little while, so just kind of wanted to talk about, you know, the different opportunities for interventions through engagement, whether it had been more kind of like organic and casual, or more intentional and direct, you know, kind of, again, confronting that mixed bag of politics, but also coming at it in a way in which we can decide to engage and be more effective in that engagement. You know, how awesome it was to bring in that signage that we had, and kind of the banner being a propaganda tool, just by having it sitting in our camp. That was super, super cool. And those are kind of the latest updates there. So again, I know it's not super structured, kind of rambly, but I think that's probably what I'll wrap with, unless jump into the discussion if I have any other thoughts.